Hamas, Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, or Islamic Resistance Movement, was founded in 1987 during the First Intifada, an uprising of Palestinians against Israeli occupation. The organization's origins are rooted in the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, a broader Islamist movement founded in Egypt. Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, one of the leading figures of the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood, played a pivotal role in forming Hamas, seeking to combine religious and nationalist goals. Hamas' primary goal at its inception was to liberate Palestine from Israeli occupation and establish an Islamic state. Unlike the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, which was secular and led by Yasser Arafat, Hamas presented itself as an Islamist alternative, combining religious ideology with resistance to Israel. The movement emphasized jihad, struggle, as a core method for achieving its goals, and it adopted both military and political strategies. In 1988, Hamas published its official charter, which laid out its vision. The document called for the destruction of the State of Israel, the establishment of an Islamic State in all of historic Palestine, including what is now Israel, and rejected any form of peace negotiations with Israel. It accused Jews of orchestrating international conflicts and controlled financial and political institutions worldwide, citing conspiracy theories. Hamas' charter also stressed that the struggle for Palestine was both a national and religious duty for Muslims worldwide, declaring that Islam must guide the liberation effort. This blending of nationalist goals with religious ideology set Hamas apart from other Palestinian factions. During the First Intifada, 1987 to 1993, Hamas initially focused on grassroots activities, such as social services, education, and healthcare. This allowed it to build a strong support base among Palestinians. The organization, however, also engaged in violent resistance, conducting attacks against Israeli military personnel and settlers. After the signing of the Oslo Accords in 1993, which sought a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Hamas strongly opposed the agreement. The movement believed that any negotiation or compromise with Israel was unacceptable. As the PLO and Israel began peace talks, Hamas began a campaign of suicide bombings and other forms of violence against Israeli civilians in the mid-1990s, establishing itself as a hardline opponent to peace efforts. During the Second Intifada, 2000 to 2005, Hamas became a leading actor in armed resistance, significantly escalating its attacks, including suicide bombings targeting buses, markets, and civilian areas within Israel. In a significant political shift, Hamas decided to participate in the 2006 Palestinian legislative elections. Its decision to run for office surprised many, as it had previously opposed political engagement with the institutions of the Palestinian Authority, PA, which were a product of the Oslo Accords. Hamas campaigned on a platform of anti-corruption and resistance to Israel, capitalizing on dissatisfaction with the ruling Fatah party. To the shock of many observers, Hamas won the elections, securing a majority in the Palestinian Legislative Council. This victory led to increased tensions between Hamas and Fatah, the dominant faction in Palestinian politics. In 2007, after months of violent clashes between Fatah and Hamas forces, Hamas forcibly took control of the Gaza Strip. Since then, Hamas has governed Gaza, while the Palestinian Authority, led by Fatah, retained control of the West Bank. This split created two parallel Palestinian governments and deepened internal divisions. Hamas' use of violence, particularly suicide bombings targeting civilians, has drawn widespread international condemnation. Many countries, including Israel, the United States, the European Union, Canada, Japan, and others, have designated Hamas as a terrorist organization. These designations primarily apply to Hamas military wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, but in many cases extend to the entire organization. However, some countries and organizations, particularly in the Arab and Muslim world, have viewed Hamas as a legitimate resistance movement against Israeli occupation. The organization receives financial, logistical, and political support from countries like Iran and groups like Hezbollah. Following Hamas' takeover of Gaza in 2007, Israel imposed a strict blockade on the territory, controlling its borders, airspace, and waters. The blockade, supported by Egypt, aimed to limit Hamas' access to weapons and resources that could be used for attacks on Israel. However, it also contributed to a severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza, affecting millions of civilians. Since then, several major conflicts have broken out between Hamas and Israel. 2008 to 2009, Operation Cast led a 3-week conflict involving Israeli airstrikes and ground operations in Gaza, following rocket attacks by Hamas on Israeli towns. 2012, Operation Pillar of Defense, a brief conflict triggered by Hamas rocket fire and Israeli assassinations of Hamas leaders. 2014, Operation Protective Edge, a 50-day war, one of the deadliest conflicts between Hamas and Israel. It resulted in widespread destruction in Gaza and heavy casualties on both sides. 2021, may conflict after escalating tensions in East Jerusalem, Hamas launched rockets into Israel, prompting an Israeli military response. The fighting lasted 11 days and resulted in significant destruction in Gaza. As of 2024, Hamas remains the de facto ruler of Gaza and a major player in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It has continued to maintain its military capabilities, including the development and firing of rockets into Israel, while also engaging in diplomacy with regional actors, including Egypt and Qatar. Despite international efforts at mediation, no lasting peace agreement has been reached. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza has worsened due to the Israeli blockade, periodic conflicts, and internal governance challenges. Hamas' refusal to recognize Israel and its ongoing commitment to armed resistance has kept the organization isolated from peace negotiations. However, Hamas remains popular among segments of the Palestinian population due to its stance against Israeli occupation and its provision of social services in Gaza, even though some Palestinians criticize its governance and policies. Since its formation in 1987, Hamas has evolved from a grassroots Islamist movement into a complex entity that blends political governance and militant resistance. Its role in Palestinian politics and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict continues to be contentious and polarizing, with ongoing ramifications for both the region and international relations. The movement's steadfast opposition to Israel, coupled with its ideological and military posture, ensures that Hamas will remain a central player in this long-running conflict.